Hi everyone, this is Eric. I make video games. You might be aware of that. I don't know. Hi. I want to talk about something I've been doing for December because I noticed how work on my other video game, Witches Heaven, which you can wishlist on Steam, and it would be cool if people could do that. Anyway, work on that game got a bit exhausting towards the end of November, for reasons I don't want to go too deep into, but I felt I noticed how I got too impatient with things, and that doesn't really lead to basically it would lead if I had to continue to work on what I wanted to do there, things would have been not good, and I would have had to do it again at a later point when I was less exhausted with the game. So I decided to take a bit of a breather from that project and try something for December that I wanted to do for quite some time, but never really either didn't feel confident enough in my ability to code it or felt like I just never had the time to do it, which is build out a system for a JRPG slash RPG, computer RPG in general system. It looks very much like a JRPG, so it's very abstract and menu based, but there's other stuff in there. So anyway, and there are several reasons why I wanted to do this. The biggest thing is that for quite some time I've already decided that Witches Heaven is going to be the last action game that I'm going to make, because I do not want to keep making them. They're very exhausting to make for me, and I I want to do something else. I want to do something that gives me a bit more space to explore some different ideas. But for this to work, I need the technical, mostly the technical foundation for it, but also want to have to explore some ideas and want to see what works and what doesn't work, and how I could translate some of the things that I there are reasons why I want to make a role-playing game next, or something like a role-playing game mixed with different and other ideas. And most of them have to do with a desire to tell, for one, to tell stories and work more much more putting narrative much more at the center of things, but also and to explore ideas for worlds that I have and other things, and also to be much more systems focused and centered, because I feel this is something that I always drift towards to anyway, no matter what I'm making. So making a game that is more puts that stuff more at the center of everything, I feel is more of a something that could help me with just working on things. I've been working on this since basically since December started, so roughly 2 weeks now. I have a mostly working battle system. There are some small things that are still missing from it, but you can do things, and enemies do things at you, and it has effects and things happen. Not everything is quite connected to where it's supposed to go, but that's basically these are the next steps. I just feel talking through this because, well, why not? There's a lot of stuff that really excites me about this, and also the reason for a video is because I don't have the spoons to write it right now. Once it's the thing that I want to make is done, I might sit down and do a more structured approach to what this is, but this isn't that today. This is me rambling, which I think is fine. So let's talk a little bit about like how I went through this. I've made a domino board for this game and for this idea, and I'm just going to like talk through some of these things, but not through all of them, because not everything is going to be like that much relevant. There's a lot of like just like me putting stuff down to organize things, and like less about like, okay, this is like, these are my like larger ideas of like what I want to make. So let's and this is like really how I started this project, which is just like putting down trying to put down games and things, like games that made me start to think about building my own RPG, and then trying to extract those elements from these games that I felt like were the most, like were the key parts of me starting to think about this kind of stuff. So the touchdowns were like live alive, and like here like the things that I tried to like extract from it. Live alive, I think that's how you pronounce it. It's the idea of like using an RPG as an anthology, so not having like a one big like connected story, but like using an RPG system, an RPG battle system, and like the ideas and mechanics behind those to like basically put these systems into different contexts and explore what you can do with that. Undertale is, for me, mostly the idea here is how that game used like battles and like specifically enemy attacks to like tie in like emotional and fictional stakes into the battle, which I still think is like a pretty neat thing. The funny thing is that like at this point, Undertale is such a well known and like well established thing that it's like it sounds incredibly boring. Oh yeah, there's like a very specific thing I want to like, again, that made me think about, oh, what can you do with an RPG system, and what can you do with like RPG battles, and what can you express through them? And now it gets a little bit more strange. Also, I realized I forgot to save something, because it's not only like video games that like made me think about this. It's also tabletop RPGs, mostly, and that's something that is missing here. One of the big influences here is Blades in the Dark, or the entire Fortune in the Dark system. Also the Powered by the Apocalypse games, and to a lesser degree, what's called Powered by the Resistance? I don't know. Like a big example here would be Hard, The City Beneath. For different reasons, I forgot to put down Hard here. I didn't put it down, I just forgot to save the board. I did put it down and then close the browser window, and it got lost. So the reason for Blades in the Dark, there are like several things, and it kind of like all of these tabletop RPG systems, and there are a lot more like in other aspects, have like interesting approaches to how to deal with failure, how to deal with characters getting hurt, how to deal with long-term consequences of actions. Specifically for Hard, what interested me there was the idea of having different types of long-term consequences, and like different types of basically characters getting hurt, and different types in that sense of damage, which is something that you like will see once I start talking about what I've built here. The other interesting part here is like the idea of like characters being able to help each other, which is something that I like, if you think about it, is something that you rarely have in like, if you take a very, very bare bones idea of like a JRPG system, you don't like you have your attack, you have your special whatever, you have your item menu, and then maybe you have the defend option, which is just like, yeah, you just do nothing. And I don't know, maybe your defense gets a little bit more increased, but aside from using an ability or an item on like a party member, you don't really have like the ability to just like use one character to support whatever the other character is doing. And again, this is something I find really interesting in like tabletop games, where occasionally you are in a situation where one character doesn't really have the moves or like the attributes that can really contribute to like solving a problem, but what they can always do is like figure out a way to help another character get like a better chance of succeeding at something. And this is something, again, where I just thought about like, how could you do something, how could you put a help mechanic into like an RPG system, like a computer RPG system? How would that look like? And the next step is also because like in some tabletop games, helping also like has like a like character connection mechanic attached to it, where like your relationship to like a different party member changes and develops depending on like how often they help each other. So they're like, again, they're like ways to use like systemic interactions to then like spin-off narrative consequences out of that, and that's something that I find interesting. Wildermyth is like another big thing that I took from what I like about that game, is just like the aspect that like time passes between like your campaigns and things happen in between them. That's just like something that you have. Like things develop over time. The way the world looks isn't at the beginning of like a campaign isn't the same as like towards the end of it. The like the intermission scenes that Wildermyth has, like where like it's again just characters talking to each other. It's not just you explore and you have a battle. So there's like again like kind of like a meta narrative layer like in between these things. Mystic Quest Legend, or as like people from the US might know it as Final Fantasy Mystic Quest, which is the first JRPG that I ever played because we didn't get anything else over here. It's mostly like simple combat. There's like a very direct connection in this game between like exploring and encounters, because you can always see like when you're running, when you will have an encounter on the exploratory layer. And what I found interesting about that game when I played it when I was much older again, was to realize how they use the amount of space you can see, like the amount of like area you can see on the map, to kind of like encourage people to explore while also being aware, okay, if I keep going down that route, I'm going to have to like fight at least 3 encounters and then I'll get to that treasure chest, and then have this start this process of like, okay, do I want to do this now? That game doesn't really do much with that part, because like exploration isn't very, you can always exit the dungeon and like can do it again and whatever, so it's not really that big of a consequence behind it. But there's like, I felt there's like space for that. Final Fantasy V, because the job system is cool. It's very broken. The boss fights are cool in that game as well, because each boss fight kind of like requires a very specific type of approach to make it very easy. And that's just something, again, that I find interesting in terms of like, or like to put it this way, Final Fantasy V is like fully aware that like a lot of the abilities that the players get are broken, and embraces that fact, and then spins off fights and encounters with that awareness that like, well, the battle system and the character progression system is kind of broken in parts, so why not just build things that exploit these things, or that give players the option to exploit very specific elements of it. Next part is like the Saga series. Here I'm specifically talking about the Game Boy games because I haven't played the other ones. What I like there is like, just because these games are like fairly simple, they all have like very interesting like premises in terms of like narrative and like the worlds they set up. They have like vastly different like character progression systems depending on like which character class you're picking. Next one, and that's like something that isn't really like attached to an RPG, but like another game that is on here is The Yogg, which is interesting in that way that it like creates a narrative while being completely honest about what's going to happen at the end, and creating a story where it's not really about, oh, are the players going to prevent the destruction of their place of like where they live, but much more about what are you going to do in the weeks before the apocalypse happens, and have then these actions tie into what the outcome or like what the aftermath of the apocalypse is. And the other thing that I really like about that game is how much it creates with very little text. I played it recently again, and like a lot of the text prompts are just like single sentence descriptions of things, but it does a lot with very little words, which is something I really like as an idea because, well, writing is hard. At the same time, I'm more of like use a lot of words sometimes. It's difficult. Next step is Dragon Age 2, because Dragon Age 2 has like, again, and you can kind of see like a through line or like a common thing in some parts here. Dragon Age 2 is a story about a group of people like in one place over the course of several years. And again, the place changes, people change in between, and it creates like a narrative out of that. And the last one is Blue Reflection Second Light. You could also take the first one here, which has like a very interesting way of how it within the battle, how it like unlocks special moves over time, where you have basically you start with like basic special moves, and the longer the battle takes, or like depending on what you do, you unlock like more powerful moves over time, which again is just like an interesting idea. Plus the idea of like having, again, and this is like a different thing, having characters that are not really active members of like the battle party still providing like some kind of like special effect to like providing support to characters that are actually in the battle, which again ties in some way back to the idea of like helping and supporting different party members when you're like, when your character like, or one specific character is kind of like doesn't really have much else to contribute at that point. So that's like the very, very basic, or like the interesting elements from like these ideas, and then I try to like pick out like common lines from these things, which is episodic storytelling. So like you have different play states to a degree, or like this is something that I like episodic storytelling, not in the sense of like, okay, like a Telltale game, but more like very specific distinctions between like an exploratory state of the game and a downtime state, in that sense. Like the biggest example here would be Wildermyth, which does that in the you have the overworld campaign mode where you like explore hexes on the map and like things happen and you fight battles and you like play through that part. And then you have these in-between states where you like, oh, I don't know, 20 years pass, and like in that time your characters have done these things. And you have like this very distinctive like split between these things. What Wildermyth doesn't do is like give you any form of like direct influence about the stuff that the characters do in between these things. Another point is like having a story that is more about the people and places over time. So again, like you have a temporal aspect to it. The other aspect, or like what's very important for me, is to have it much more about the characters that live in a certain place and much less about like what happens to the world at large. And again, next point, the story is more about the people than it is about doing something big and world-shattering. Going back to The Yogg, you cannot stop the apocalypse, it's just gonna happen. Then the next part is deploying the battle system as a storytelling device. Using like the way, like the abstraction that like in JRPG battle system can give you to like frame very specific moments, and and give you very specific actions that you can do. Very character classes, so like having very different ways of interacting with the world. And this goes back to a little bit also what I think Blades in the Dark does really well, or like in general, like that type of like game system does really well, is have you, and this is another card that got deleted, have where the attributes that you have kind of define the way your character mainly acts upon the world. Because, well, you're not good at everything. But in theory, if you can figure out a way to like fictionally justify it, you could use like a move you have like more stats in to perform a different action. With some caveats to that, but you can do that. But in general, that kind of like creates this thing where, again, your character's attributes and your main character's like, in a sense, verbs that you have at your disposal frame the way they act upon the world. And that's something that I find really interesting. And while I was building the system, I really saw how this, what this means, because I built some very different characters. Like each character has like a very specific way they influence the battle itself. And that is very much dependent on who they are. And this says in a way you can do this, and you can use this both as a way to show who a character is, to like do characterization in that sense, and also show how they influence the world around them, how they look at the world, and how they act upon it, mainly act upon it. Having an open encounter structure is another thing that I think is important. Basically, what I would like to do is mostly have things be very to not hide things from players. So have like most of the information and most of like potential consequences be very open and be very like visible to people, so that they can make decisions on like whether or not they, for example, go down a very specific path or not go down a very specific path. And the last bit is like a small group of friends and their place in a community. And again, this goes back to like the idea of having something that is much more about people and places and much less about big problems. Because, well, most people are not able and do not have the means to act upon the big problems that are happening. And sometimes big problems happen without anyone being able to do anything about them. And so it's much more interesting to have, like, for me at least, right now, it's much more interesting to think about people and how they react to the world changing around them, and what this all does. This goes back to like my very big thing. Goal is to build a system that can be used to tell stories about people and places. The type of story should matter less than the system itself, because this is something I very often get lost in when I start building something. When set up correctly, this should enable you to tell different types of stories about different people in different places, with some shared elements but also a lot of differences. So build things setting agnostic, which is very hard. Again, for me, because and I realized that while I was building what I have right now, it's like, okay, yeah, who is this? Like, what are they doing? And then you start putting in very character-specific things, but like it has to be made in such a way that basically I can lift out the core systemic interactions from like the story-specific elements. So again, to ideally have something at the end that I can use as a base to create games and very specific types of games from them for the future. And this is again also like this is the part where like I'm trying to think about this also like from a commercial aspect, not really about like, oh, does it sell, but more like how can I get something where I can basically where the system that I have gives me a set of like gives me like a guideline, or like, okay, this is like kind of like what you're doing. These are the rules that it's all based on, but the story arc that you're going to explore, the characters that are going to be in there, the place, the time, the environments, and all that kind of stuff, these can all be different. Like you can think about this as you have like a tabletop system that is just the rule set. We can just say D&D at this point, even though but it's like, not when you're saying it's like you're playing D&D, rarely is like there is no the D&D setting. There are like different settings that you can play D&D in. This is kind of like the idea here. You have like a basic set of rules and like the basic functionality of how narrative is generated and being driven forward, and then you create specific settings and campaigns using that system, with some, like, again, specific like exceptions to like specific rules, or like you adjust certain things, but like to have it like basically have it kind of like mostly agnostic, and this is also like built in mind with, so that I don't have to do these things over and over again every time I want to make a new game, because again, you have, with all of these things, when you think about this commercially, the less time you spend building the things that enable you to build the thing that you want to sell, the less time making a new game takes, the more often you can make a game, the more often you can release it, and theoretically, the more often you earn money with it. Who knows how much, but that's at least the idea, and not like what's happening with me right now, where like every game takes 4 years, which is too long. Let's just ignore Virtua 7, which is like 8 years, and will be almost 9, which is awful. Like, don't do that. And these are like all ideas and like ways to prevent that in the future. And the last part here is like, this is like what I had just in mind in general, and like personal thoughts, idea, and like things I would like to have and things I would like to show. Anything can be a battle. The scale changes fluently and can even change within the battle itself. Anything can be an attack. You can debate someone to death as much as you can stab them. Party members do not die, but they will carry wounds that will affect how their story develops. This is like going back to the tabletop RPG like inspiration side of things, where characters, for example, in a Forge in the Dark game can die, but it's much more likely that they stress out and acquire like a long-term narrative like scar from like what they've experienced, which again helps with characterization, helps with like creating like a more like longer-term arc. And what I think is the most important part is like it keeps the story moving forward. With the way most battle systems work in computer RPGs, when a character dies, it's a very much like, okay, the story stops at this point. In some games, you have kind of like if you take something like XCOM, for example, where a character dies there, well, the game continues and you just get a new recruit, which this kind of like moves the story forward, but like reduces kind of like the specificity, whatever, makes the character less specific, because they're like replaceable. They have to be replaceable, because otherwise a death would be much more consequential. In something again like Final Fantasy, when a character is dead, they can't do anything in the battle, and you have to revive them. And when all of your characters are dead, the battle's over, the game's over, and you have to reload. And that's not moving the story forward. It stops the story and forces you to rewind and try again. And figuring out a system where you have consequences, where like losing a battle has consequences without stopping the progression of the story, is like difficult. And this is again one of the reasons why the main story arcs I want to deploy this in are things where something happens that ends the game regardless of what the players are doing. It's much more about exploring how these characters are dealing with it. And this is like something where you can then open up the space of like, okay, you have like where having a long-term consequence, having like something that changes the way the character looks at the world and interacts with things is much more meaningful, while also still enabling players to like keep going forward instead of like redoing the same fight 5 times in a row because like they were unlucky in some way or another. And that's the next thing, trying to build something where people are not afraid of failing, where they're not afraid of like, oh god, my party got wiped. That's kind of bad. But having them more interested in like exploring what that could mean later down the line, which is hard because like video games teach you that failure is bad all the time, and that's again going back to tabletop games. Sometimes you want something to fail because something funny can happen, or like something interesting can happen, something that fundamentally changes the story that you and your group are telling can happen. And that's not like, again, that's not a hard, okay, it's over state. It's more like a, okay, let's see where this is going to go now when like this larger consequences happen. Next thing is like everything should move along quickly but still have impact. This is mostly about pacing, like battle pacing and things like that, because I don't want things to take very long. Again, going back to the York is a very cool game, and you play it in like 10 minutes or like 20 minutes, give or take. Maybe half an hour, depending on the group size that you're playing with. But it does a lot with not much, and it's quick. And that's kind of like something where I think it's interesting. It's, again, also having things quickly means you can make more with less time. In a way, maybe. I don't know. Next part is, again, this is like tabletop stuff. Clocks always tick, so time always moves. Players won't be able to do everything. What they do and don't do will have consequences. The next thing, this is more like the idea of like rough ideas of how I would like to do like larger scale, like in quotes, dungeon crawler, exploration layer type of stuff. And this again goes back to like long-term consequences and failing. For example, okay, you have to explore a dungeon. You only have like, I don't know, a month to do that, and wiping with your party takes up several days of the time that you have to actually complete the task. And not completing the task will then have repercussions like during the next exploration cycle, whatever that means and however that looks. Who knows? I don't know right now for that thing that I'm making, because I'm trying to not think about these things unless I really have to, because again, I don't want to be too specific in the things that I'm making. Switch between different modes, dungeon crawl, exploration layer, more zoomed out narrative/management layer. This is basically, imagine you have something like the York, and then you have something like a Final Fantasy, like a SNES era Final Fantasy game, a bit similar. And you mash them together, and you have like a layer where you play this, and then it zooms out, and then you play the York with the characters that are in your party, where you do different things for a certain amount of time, where you like explore these characters, look at these characters in different environments, in different scenes, in different modes of interaction, and all that kind of stuff. And again, if you played something like a Fortune in the Dark game, this is the difference between you having your downtime segment where the players work on long-term projects, work on their personal things, like spend time to heal and rest, and the parts where you go out and steal something or murder someone or whatever you do in Blades in the Dark. And the last part, this is like something I would like to do. I don't know if this will ever come anywhere. And this is the part where I never mentioned Dragon's Dogma in these things. But one thing I really like about Dragon's Dogma, about the first game and the second game, is that every once in a while you fight a group of goblins and suddenly a griffin drops out of the sky. or like a larger monster shows up, or like something happens that changes the dynamic of the battle you were just fighting. I had one encounter in Dragon's Dogma where I fought a bunch of like goblins. I think a Cyclops showed up, and then a Griffin showed up as well. And it was just complete chaos. I think an Ogre also. It was incredible. And the idea is like you could have something like that in like like in a JRPG battle system where like depending on like the environment that you're in and like the state of the battle and like some random factors, a different enemy can just show up that's just close by and thinks, oh wait a second, I'm going to mess up that day. Again, not quite sure if this will make it anywhere in the thing that I'm building right now, but it's an idea that I would like to have. Okay, what's other stuff that I can do here? Is like battle system stuff. Oh yeah, let's go down to like battle system ideas to like show a little bit about that what I talked about in terms of like different sets of scale, right? Place for random battle ideas. Battle in a public space. Physical attacks will cause a massive painful counterattacks unless you're able to break your enemies into like you basically force your enemies into attacking you first. And then could also be an effect that's generated by a specific enemy. Could call the effect something like Aura of Civility. This is something that I made it into the system that I'm building right now. There's an enemy that does that. That nullifies physical attacks. There is no counterattack right now, but it's basically them creating like an environment that severely discourages the use of physical violence. Next random battle ideas, you can stab your anxiety. Yeah, you cannot do that because anxiety is not a thing that responds to sword. You can fight a castle. The bear doesn't care about your arguments. You have a good cop and a bad cop fight. The good cop does status effects. The bad cop shoots you afterwards. Another enemy idea, and this is kind of like goes in the same vein of like you have to fight a castle. It's just a door. And again, this is going back to the idea of different scales and like using a battle system to like for different contexts where you have and again going back to like a Fortune in the Dark game or like Blades in the Dark where you like build a heist. Say someone has to like steal something from like a rich person's villa. And you build out a set of like potential challenges. One is there are guards that you kind of have to like avoid. How you avoid them is up to like the players, like up to the plan of the players, but like it requires a specific set of like successful roads to get past. You could also say there's a locked door. How do you get past it? What approach are you choosing? Are you like picking the lock? Are you like kicking the door down? Are you like trying to figure out a key? Are you looking for a different way past? Are you like using magic to phase through the wall, or like are you summoning a ghost? Who knows? Like there are different ways to get past the door, but the door is an obstacle. And you can just put a door in your JRPG battle and just say, okay, this is something that you have to overcome here. Not everything that you're applying to the door will work. You cannot argue against the door. The door will not listen to you because the door cannot listen to you. But there are other ways to do that, right? And the rest, just like me writing down things that I think are cool ideas for enemies. The Swan Lord, a big swan that controls a big piece of land. It's basically like, what if a swan was a landlord? The dipshit robot, the holotype, a floating bone that does metaphysical stuff. Now we're getting a bit into like what I'm building. So let's get a bit about what I've done here in terms of like setting this up. And this is like I'm going through the characters just to show what I've had, and I think then I'll show the battle system, what I've built so far, because there's a lot of other stuff like the meta narrative layer and stuff, but that doesn't exist at all right now. If I have time this month, I want to build like a very small example of it, but we'll have to see how this works. So these are like the characters that I've built. These are like very specific archetypes. And in a way, you can also think about like these damage types as like, in a way, similar to like Pokemon typing. Not exactly, but like in the way of like, okay, this one does fire damage. This one does, I don't know, like water damage. And what we have here is like physical damage, material damage, mental damage, and metaphysical damage. Which is kind of leaning onto like the resistance types that Heart has. Heart has blood resistance, or like blood fallout / damage. Fortune. Is it fortune? No, supply. Which, like, if someone knows Heart, this would be blood. This would be supply. I think this is this is an echo. This is mind, and this would be echo. Like, roughly. Not exactly, because this is all a little bit different, but like in general. And like we have like then what you just have to say, this does like damage to like physical things, and especially like living physical things. Material damage does like things to inanimate objects and things. Mental damage is arguing, more or less, and trying to convince someone without punching them. And metaphysical is trying to touch the nature of the thing itself. And they all, like, again, like, the interesting part here is that all of these have, like, what I've built here are, like, people who are very specific and very good at, like, acting upon the way in one very specific way. And like you can think of like, oh, this person touches the nature of things. That's like much more powerful than someone who punches hard. Yeah, but what if the person that punches hard is so like keyed in on punching hard that they're as like effective at that as someone who like can change the nature of being of something? I don't know. Like this is it's possible in this game because you can just build a game that does that. Which then has consequences, right? Like, the moment you build something like that, the moment you say something like that, oh, someone, like, in specific circumstances, you're about as powerful with the punch as you are with, like changing the metaphysical, like, the fabric of the universe, like, around you. It says something in some way or another. But yeah, like, basically these are then the characters. Like each of them have like very specific ways of acting on the world. This one is very good at punching. This one is very good at destroying things and using things. This one is very good at like arguing and using knowledge as a way of getting past and helping. And this one is just like can do things that nobody can really understand and explain. Because you have to have... I like this part so much because this is like... It's... I don't know. I don't want to know what this is, and I don't want to explain what this is, because I feel like if you're saying something touches things on a metaphysical level, it has to be on a level that even you, the person making it, cannot really explain it. You just put in words here and hope that it kind of like does something. And this is like also what you can see, and like people that, I don't know, the few people that played RPGs with me might know some of these characters, because I've taken my own RPG characters and put them in a game. Not all of them. Vortex is inspired by a character that I'm playing right now. Round Robin is my go-to Forged in the Dark character. Man was a one-off side character in an Armor Stir conflict turn scene. And Elysia is new. And yeah, this is like, again, how they interact with the world. Violence, using items and being reckless about things. Then, and this is again, one big problem for me when I make games in general is like I have very specific scenes in mind, and then just like try to push everything toward having that in the game. And man, and like the moves and all of that is kind of like that. But also I think it's again, it's part of the fabric of everything, is like he is so keyed in to like arguing and using knowledge and being like good at talking, that he is able with a move to drag a door into a debate and cause the door to miss its next turn. How will the door, like, why does a door have a turn? Well, because that's the world that they exist in is. Everything has a turn when they're in a battle, even physical objects. And again, of course, you like have to have an ad hominem attack where like what they usually do, like ideological damage or mental damage with the attacks because they're talking to someone. This isn't like hurting someone's physical well-being, but like with that move, they can do that, which again is important when they're in a situation where like talking to someone doesn't do anything. And these are like items that again have specific effects that are different and that are limited in usage. The other thing that I wanted to have here is like I didn't want to have like a shared large inventory like you have in a lot of JRPGs. I want to have like the inventory system to be again much more similar to like the gear selection you have in something like Blades in the Dark, where each character class has a specific set of gear that they can choose to take on a mission and then deploy on that mission. And I kind of want to have it like similar here, where you before you start like a dungeon crawl, like an exploration or like the JRPG part of it all, you decide what things to take with you, and these are the things that you can use, and you cannot replenish these resources while you're out there exploring. You have what you have, and you have to like make decisions on when to use these, which also then explains why some of them are deeply broken. For example, single use restarts current fight. You can't just like use that thing and restart the fight once you realize, wait a second, that doesn't work. Or like dropping someone's defense to nothing, like a specific type defense. Still debating on whether or not to change materialist literature to idealist literature, because I think material defense should be reduced by idealist literature and not like, I don't know. This is like, it sounds silly, but framing is important. Like the words you put on the screen and the like what consequences these things have is important in terms of like what you're like expressing, what you're saying about the world and how it works, right? And this is kind of like, again, these are all of these things is, and this goes back to like something I just realized it's almost 50 minutes and it's still rambling. Another important part about all of this is, or like, this was nowhere, I've put nowhere, but like something that I keep coming back to when I'm thinking about how to build a game system, a non-action game system. It's a bit harder to do in an action game, but like in something like this where it's like very set and things follow out of very specific, like everything has a very specific order. You do something, the enemy does something. You do that specific type of attack, it has these consequences against, like it checks against this and has then this, like the following consequences. So you have a very set and rigid set of rules. Special moves, anything that like characters do and anything that enemies do, should be built in such a way that they break these rules. The most easiest part is to say, okay, every character has like one turn in a round, and like they have a set amount of actions in their turn, and once they've performed these actions, they are done until it loops around back to them. Having then a special move that gives them more actions in a turn, or gives them a whole nother turn, or like restarts the entire round and gives the entire party like another set of actions or whatever, is like the classic example of like a move breaking the basic rules of the game. And most of these things are built around that in a way that they break the basic idea of the game. A move that takes an action away from a character. A move that attacks multiple enemies at once. Like moves that change the nature of an attack, changes your attack typing for a few turns to like do a different type of attack, restarting the fight, healing your party, like declaring an enemy to not be real. These are all things that break the fabric, or like break the rules in some way, and these are the things that then create the interesting elements. And this is also like why I'm not overly concerned about all of this being a bit broken. This is something I realized when I like put them in, because you can do a lot of things that very much negate what enemies can do. However, enemies are the same. I can just like, let's just go down here. Let's look at the enemies. These are the enemies that I've built. Just to like, as an example, I've built like archetypical characters, and then I built archetypical enemies. So the physical attack character like has a move called Bully, where like whatever, like it, where for the next turn it changes the attack typing of the character, which sounds a bit weird because if you see here, it has low physical defense. So alone, this character basically makes them like, gives them the element that they are weak against. But paired with, for example, the ideal archetype enemy who has aura of civility, it's very powerful because suddenly a character cannot attack and can't do anything unless you do something to change that. It's kind of like, you know, like these are the interesting part here for me is, and this is already something that is hard for me to predict in a lot of ways with the little stuff that I have here. I have 4 characters with 2 moves each and 2 items, and a help move, and occasionally like special help functionality under specific circumstances. And I have 4 enemies with a basic attack and 1 special move. And this already creates like an amount of combinations that for me right now is hard to predict what, like how this, like how impactful all of it is. And I find this very exciting because obviously the more of this stuff you put in there, the bigger and more exciting this can all get, at least for me. And this is like also something I've been thinking about in terms of thinking about Final Fantasy V, where there are specific encounters and specific fights where like where having a specific job with a specific move just completely negates whatever else has been built in that fight. And this is something where I think about, sometimes I think these were put in there intentionally, but sometimes it's just something that happens because you cannot overlook and like plan for every single like combination of like skill and enemy type and party composition. And also I think in a way you shouldn't, because when you're like hyper prepared for that and balance everything out correctly, it gets boring because then again having a specific character build and having a specific character composition like party composition and like doesn't matter anymore, because well the cool stuff is only cool for like that much, but you can't really go much higher, and it also can really be incredibly ineffective. And trying to figure out like being cool with things being broken to a degree is, I think, fairly important in that part, or at least right now for me. Who knows what I'll say once, if there ever exists more than exists right now. Like, again, the plan is to do this, like finish Witcher 7 and then do one of these, like in big, but we'll have to see. So, and yeah, to go down here, well, we have this just to show. This is slightly different. So what we have right now is like we have the 4 characters, we have 4 enemy types, and what I then want to do is build one boss fight that is a bit different, and build a set of encounters and have this I'd be happy if towards the end of the month I have this, like basically four different encounters, like 1, 2, 3, and then a boss fight. If things go really well, I have like the narrative layer like example after that, just to show, okay, and this is like how this might look like once the characters are done. But yeah, that really depends on like the next week, because again, that narrative layer doesn't exist at all yet, and yeah, that's a big one. But yeah, in general, like I hope that towards the end of the year, I have at least like something where like, you can play 4 battles and things happen, and maybe you have a good time and you fight some weirdos. That would be cool. But yeah, I'll end this video with just showing you how this looks right now. It's very placeholdery. I removed some of the placeholders just for this video, but it's still very placeholdery, so be nice about this. Again, the goal is for this to look a bit better, hopefully, towards the end. But yeah, I'll do a cut and then we'll see the rest. Okay, here we have the battle system, what I've built. You can see down here we have these 4 characters. This is Vortex, this is Round Robin, this is Man, and this is Alicia. And up there we have like 4 different placeholder sprites for enemies. Up left we have the holotype, then we have the dipshit robot, then we have the door, and the... What is it called right now? God, is it the Civil Swan? I don't know. This is just Retro Swan from GB Roba, which you can buy on Steam. Might be discounted soon again because of winter sale, but anyway. And yeah, these are just like people that you can beat up, and then you have like your menu down there. The problem right now is there is no go back function in the menus. So the moment I commit to a menu, the moment I'm like I have to do it. So let's just do things here and see how it goes. So what do I want to do? So the Civil Swan is kind of like awful, because the Civil Swan will probably create aura civility, which will destroy and the dipshit robot will use bully. So we should probably try and get rid of the dipshit robot, which probably the best idea would be to do that. Man words, yeah. That's like the thing when you put just the character name, like do code and like no possessive or like attribution, whatever it's called. Yeah, man words cut into the enemy. There are damage numbers happening in the background. You cannot see them. Let's just do a dropkick here. Dropkick is a move that does area damage, but like the height of the the idea is like, if you want to visualize it, that Vortex kicks the enemies she's attacking into the other enemies. So the main enemies like damage is dependent on like how many enemies are around them. So in the center is usually the best one. Let's do a help. Help right now is basically you give half of like that character's attack stat to the character you're helping. Also, if that character already did their turn, it does nothing. Which, yeah, okay, might be like, I might have to build a check in there. And let's just look at Round Robin's moves. Round Robin has 2 moves. One is Rush Drop, which is like an area attack that also damages them. And Use Everything, which empties out their inventory, and depending on how many things they still had in their inventory, it will deal that amount of material damage. The dipshit robot has some material defense, but it's not that high, and also I should have like some like extra damage from that. So this should kill, maybe? Yeah, it did. The holotype opens the party's mind to new ideas. This decreases the entire party's defense against mental damage, or like ideological damage. The door increases everyone's defense, and now nobody can use physical attacks. However, I hope this works. However, round robin doesn't have blue drink anymore, and I'm stuck in the menu. That's cool. So we have to do this again. It's awesome. But you can already see, yeah. So what I wanted to do was, and I think I'll just stop here because you can see, like, yeah, maybe having like a functionality to go back a menu would be nice, because otherwise you soft lock the game. So what I wanted to do, so round robin has an item called blue drink. What does blue drink do? Well, for like the next, I think, 3 turns, your attacks do like mental damage instead of whatever your default attack type is. When aura civility is there, like Vortex can't do anything because she does physical damage, but with blue drink she doesn't. So that's the idea behind that, and this is where you can see how basically both sides of the encounter having very broken abilities creates potentially interesting interactions, because you have a set of things that you can do to influence the state of the battle, and like what characters can do and how they can act upon the world. But so does the enemy, and like trying to negotiate that. And then hopefully, that's again the next step, hopefully have these things like cascade towards like throughout several encounters, like gives like space for like interesting interactions and interesting things, because right now it doesn't matter, like I can use blue drink whenever. However, if you know, okay, I still have like that amount of encounters before I'm done, do I want to risk it, or do I just like try to figure out a different way through that? And the other part is that there are usually several ways to get past like an encounter and to get past like this the problem that you're in. You could also use like a different character's ability to make the swan waste its turn so that it cannot use aura of civility, for example, because they're debating or they're like being grappled or whatever. So there are different ways to go through this. I don't want to like linger on here too much. It's already been an hour. It's incredible. But at the same time, from like what I learned from YouTube video essays is that an hour is way too short for a video. So maybe I should ramble on. Yeah, again, this is what is here right now. I am very excited about this thing because it lets me work on ideas and lets me work on things I've been thinking about for years. And just having a space where I can try and explore these things is nice. Yeah, still a long way to go to see how well this actually works. But it's just nice to have like something where you press the buttons and it does things, and just for me to see how, and again, this is like something that is like always very in front of my mind when I'm making things, is framing matters. Like how you phrase things and how you how you put certain things in context with like the objects and like the world around it, like says something, and it's important that you like do it correctly and that you think about like with that and that you're very deliberate, let's say it this way. For me, having something like this where again you have a character that like, wait, every character has a very set way of how they interact and act upon the world. But and again, and like, it's not that, again, that the character who's just good at talking is basically useless in an RPG battle. It's like, he would only be useless if you just build a game where all he had to do was fight bears, because bears do not care about rational arguments. But you can build something where actually what he has to provide and like how he acts upon the world does matter, and like plays a role in how like everyone gets through whatever conflict they're in. And again, this is like, the next part is like to think about, okay, you have these characters and they do things, and they have specific like attributions to them, and like a specific like personality and, again, characterization to them. Why are they in a group? What are they doing? What are their goals? What is this all about? These are then the next steps, obviously, that follow to a degree, because otherwise it's just, and again, this is like the other part. It's just a thing. I'm just saying that like man debates. What it does is like it creates a thing that does a damage value to another thing. It's a spreadsheet calculation to a degree. But again, framing matters, because I frame it as this. Like there's like a meaning attached to it that it wouldn't have had if it was just like, okay, swings the sword. But even then, swinging a sword also like matters, because in specific circumstances, swinging a sword has a different meaning than it has in other situations. But anyway, this is like still a lot. As I said, I'm very excited about this. I'm trying to have something done by the end of the month that people can play. I hope it's going to be fun or like interesting in some way or another. I'm doing my best that it's going to be interesting, and even if it's not, maybe some people will get a giggle out of the dipshit robot uses bully, which is also fun. And then I'll go back to finish Virtua 7 in 2025, and that game will be done. That's like, I'm not spending another year working on this thing. It's close. It's getting there, but I think I've reached a ceiling with it. I don't think that like I'll like making it again, reworking it again won't improve it. But anyway, that's a completely different thing. See you around. I hope you have a nice month. Anyone stayed so long with this, thank you very much for watching. Look up my games on Steam. GB Roba is like specifically, I think in light of current events, fairly relevant for folks who might be, yeah. But and Wishlist Virtua 7 on Steam would be cool. It's a thing that happens, and lots of it. And yeah, keep an eye out for this one. Still have no idea how to call it. Right now I call it the resentment system. Has no meaning. It's just like something. Yeah, it has reasons why I call it that, but it's not really has any meaning in the game. Well, we'll see. Let's see. Anyway, have a good one. See you around, and goodbye.